Welcome everyone. Let's get today's event started. I'm Gabriel Metcalf, CEO of the Committee for Sydney. To begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today's event, delivering Australia's newest city, an update from the Western Parkland City Authority, is something we have long been anticipating. The Western Parkland City is a place of tremendous growth and opportunity. It's projected to be home to more than 1.5 million people by 2056. The city will be established on the strength of the new airport, the Aerotropolis, and the existing town centers, Liverpool, Penrith, Campbelltown-Macarthur, as well as a major set of transport investments. All of that is being built, being planned, being delivered as we speak, but also a lot of work is now going on the cultural and the economic development aspects of this. So we're going to hear about all of that. We're joined today by Dr. Sarah Hill, CEO, and Dr. Jennifer Westacott, Chair of the Western Parkland City Authority. Both of them will be well known to most committee members. As CEO of the Western Parkland City Authority, Sarah Hill is delivering on the vision for the metropolis of 3 cities, which she co-created in her last role as CEO of the Greater Sydney Commission. As the longtime Chief Executive of the Business Council of Australia and former senior public servant, Jennifer Westacott brings a lot of insight and true knowledge about both the private and public sectors and how they work together. It's enormously valuable to Sydney that Jennifer Westacott has agreed to take on the role of chairing this authority. So we're very pleased to have both of them join us. I think Jennifer is going to go first, followed by Sarah, and then you will have a chance to submit questions via the Q&A app on Zoom. I will sort through those and we should have a great discussion. Jennifer, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Gabriel, and good morning, everyone. And can I also acknowledge the 60,000 years of continuous Aboriginal connection to the land that makes up Australia. I'm phoning in from Canberra today, where I'm on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. On behalf of all of us, can I join Gabriel in paying our respect to elders past, present and emerging. If we go to the first slide, let me just start by talking about the economic context, because I think this is very important that we see this initiative as part of a broader story for the country. So obviously the COVID pandemic has had a profound impact on the economy and on the community. Governments around the country have acted quickly to address the consequences. And of course, as a result of that, we've achieved some of the best health and economic outcomes in the world. But we will see this kind of play out for a long period of time. Clearly, the budget last week showed a very clear focus on rebuilding investment in the economy to create jobs, but also to position the economy for the future. A huge fiscal stimulus, but in particular, a couple of things that are relevant to today's discussion: a $1.5 billion strategy for modern manufacturing, to make Australia more competitive and more resilient. And those key industries, many of which will be in the Aerotropolis and the Parkland City: medical products, recycling, clean energy, space, food, defence. And other key areas of investment in the budget that are crucial to what we'll talk about today: big investment in education, skills and apprenticeships to ensure that people have got the right skills to both retrain or train from the beginning to get these jobs that will dominate the economy in the future. And the accelerated adoption of digital technologies by businesses and households. We face as a country 2 challenges. One is we need short-term incentives to avoid a deep recession and to get those million Australians back to work. But secondly, we need to play to our strengths and start to build that economy of the future so that we can tap into those markets, those huge opportunities which will exist for the next 20 or 30 years. And we need to find new ways of both tapping in and leveraging our competitiveness. So that's where the Parkland City comes in, if we can move to the next slide. So we believe the Parkland City has the opportunity to play this incredible role across the entire Asian Pacific region. It's ambitious. We've got a very unique opportunity to realise the full potential of the Parkland City in harnessing the energy of existing businesses, existing industries, and attracting global investment and global knowledge. If you think about it, nowhere else in the world are we building a new 24/7 international airport, the first pure digital airport, joined by a well-connected, sustainably serviced, digital smart city focused on advanced production industries. Nowhere in the world is there more of a focus on a cyber-secure smart city. And then we are enhanced by the advantage of a greenfield site for planning and development, 20 billion plus of investment from all three levels of government, a commitment to cross-government collaboration in planning and delivery, particularly through the city deal. We are focused on creating a unique, powerful ecosystem on advanced production, research, development, and education. We're focused on a new education model that will see a breakthrough in the way we've delivered education to the past. A model that combines work and learning simultaneously, a model that blends vet and higher education, and a model that embeds work-related experience as part of the educational outcomes. We're very focused on addressing the economic and infrastructure imbalances across Greater Sydney. But most importantly, I guess my message today is that we want to be a magnet for national and global industry investment so that we can position this part of Sydney and indeed Australia as the place that people will grow their companies, grow their new investments over the next 2 decades. Next slide, please. So who are we and what are we doing? So we need to obviously create an authority that's capable of delivering that vision. And so in July, the Premier and the Minister announced the expansion of what was the Western City and Aerotropolis Authority to the Western Parkland City Authority. And this broader boundary, the 8 local government areas, brings a renewed focus on collaboration between state and federal governments. And our focus will be on purposeful and collaborative public sector planning, infrastructure coordination, driving livability, driving job creation, and driving new economic opportunities. We consider the strengths and opportunities across the Parkland City as a whole, particularly from an economic point of view, and that's kind of one of the main objectives in the government kind of expanding the boundaries, that we start to think about the broader economic opportunities and not just the opportunities that pick up in the Aerotropolis. And we've had a couple of key announcements, obviously the new Sydney Metro, the Western Sydney Airport, CSIRO as the anchor tenant in the Aerotropolis, the delivery of the Western City deal ramping up, and of course it was the right time to now bring some of those experts from the Greater Sydney Commission and Treasury into a new delivery agency that's focused on economic opportunity, coordinated planning, coordinated delivery, and creating opportunities for the citizens of the Parkland cities. This is one of the fastest growing regions in Australia, and that's really the kind of rationale for creating the new boundary. So if I think about this kind of economic opportunity, before I hand over to Sarah to talk about how we're going about it, we are absolutely focused on creating economic opportunities as a centrepiece for then doing the traditional town planning and the traditional infrastructure and transport coordination. However, it won't be traditional because Sarah will talk about this. We believe there is just huge opportunities to do really different things in terms of planning, in terms of delivery, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of transport. And Sarah will pick that up. But if I just go to the economic attributes, we've got 18 MOUs with national global leaders in advanced and additive manufacturing, in aerospace, in defence, in agribusiness, in research. As I said, the government's already put 20 billion on the table. And in the past few weeks, we've rezoned 6,500 hectares of land in the Aerotropolis for employment, residential and environmental uses. And we've announced initial projects that have got huge job dividends. The Western Sydney Airport, which is 28,000 jobs, the Mamre Road Precinct, 17,000 jobs, Sydney Metro, 14,000 jobs, and Cyro, which will see quite a lot of jobs in construction and 1,200 jobs permanently. I don't want to preempt government announcements, but we expect funding to develop concepts for enabling works and to progress the new education model and to progress the advanced manufacturing research facility. So I guess the kind of message from me is an economic one before Sarah talks about the other work we're doing. Now is the time for Australia and Sydney more broadly to drive investment and drive new opportunities. Now is the time to break the kind of cycle of how we've done planning, infrastructure and economic delivery in the past. I think about this with my business council hat on. Many companies around the world now are going to be restructuring. They're going to do that restructuring now. They're not going to be doing it in 2 years. They're going to be doing it now because they'll want to be positioning themselves for when the world economy starts to pick up. And we've got the two things that are really in our favour. Australia is seen as a safe place to do business. And we're also seen as having this incredibly strong economic base from which to build on and this proximity to these markets. So now we need a real purpose in attracting that investment, and we need coordination in that. We need to be promoting Sydney and then promoting the various areas of Sydney, particularly the Parkland City in our case, as an area where companies start to think about growth and start to think about where they put their growth opportunities for the next 20 years. And we've got to kind of do that by not just investment attraction, but profoundly different ways of delivering transport, of delivering connectivity, of delivering energy, of delivering education, of delivering sustainable places for people to live. And so with that, let me hand over to Sarah to talk about that side of it. But this is very much about us wanting to create new economic opportunities off the back of world-class city design that makes the Parkland City and Sydney more generally a massive magnet for investment for global companies, global enterprises to come and create new opportunities for the citizens of the Parkland City and Sydney more generally. So with that, let me hand over to Sarah.
Thanks, Jennifer. And
oh, take it away, Sarah. Good.
Thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it. And a big hello to everyone who's joined us today. We really appreciate your time and the opportunity to share with you some more of our thinking around the Western Parkland City. And so really building on the presentation from Jennifer then, I'd just like to share with you a bit of the context of the city that we're working with. I always love to put things into context and the scale of the opportunity. And then, as Jennifer mentioned, sharing with you some of the priorities we are prioritising at the moment for this enormous task ahead. Now, many of you will have heard me speak about the Western Parkland City in the context of our three cities and the significant scale and growth that has been occurring in this part of our city, certainly leading up to the current health situation that we find ourselves in. But we're very confident that on the back of COVID, the attraction of the Western Parkland City is a great place to live, to get access to parklands and recreation spaces, those things that are so important to us over the last 6 months, will only grow, will only mature, but critically, we need to be attracting those businesses and those jobs to rebalance our city. So going from an organisation focused around the 11,000 hectares around the airport, the organisation has now spanned to the 8 city deal councils, 800,000 hectares, of which about 100,000 is designated for urban uses at present. So we're looking at this area, trying to take a more cohesive, coordinated approach addressing some of those challenges that you would have heard me speak about previously, our heat, our access to water and utilities and services. I'm really doing this in a coordinated way across the 3 levels of government. So if I move on to the next slide, just really putting the geographic and temporal elements together. So initially focused around that dark green area, the 11,000 hectares of the Aerotropolis, initial stage being the Aerotropolis core, 115 hectares. And this is a focus that I'll come back to, but an area we really want to get some tangible quick wins on. Putting that 115 hectares in focus, if I compare that to Barangaroo, that's a 22 hectare area. So we're over 5 times the size of that just within the Aerotropolis core alone. Expanding out to the 11,000 hectares of that green shaded colour to the 800,000 hectares presents that incredible scale that we have to offer our citizens, our visitors, but also importantly, our foundation partners and businesses. Working over an important 5-year period to 2026 when the airport is scheduled to open, our metro lines and some critical enabling infrastructure, but certainly not losing sight of that 30-year outcome, that 30-year vision that was established by the Greater Sydney Region Plan, transport strategies, state infrastructure strategies and so forth. Moving on to the next slide now, we really want to work to develop the thinking of the Greater Sydney Commission and really develop and evolve the narrative around our parkland city as a point of difference. No longer do we want a simple a place to live, work and play like a Mars bar ad. We actually really want to create a point of difference to our competitors around the world, but indeed the most green, the most connected and the most advanced location in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, we can't create a city in a parkland without a strong focus on the green. And many of you will have heard about South Creek and the opportunities it presents to be our central park of the parkland city. But indeed, we need to ensure that we're developing our green and blue corridors across that whole 800,000 hectares, driving the sustainability and the resilience of our parkland city, but really importantly, that broader job and industry focus around the green economy and really our green focus being also our strength and our economic imperative for change and well-being. We want to be the most connected part of the Southern Hemisphere. So not only are we going to benefit from a 24/7 international airport, but new road and rail lines, a strong focus around freight and the opportunities that presents of connections across our city and indeed the state, but also a more connected city from a walkability point of view. And I know the Committee for Sydney is very strong in this focus around walkability, around cycling connections, and really to be a healthy, sustainable city, we need to have those local connections as much as the broader inter-regional connections and interstate. We also need to have a strong focus on digital, and there's one thing that we've all learned over the last few months is how critical that is to our own well-being, equity, and indeed economic attraction. And certainly in the case of building a new city, really the connections from a utilities point of view and our broader economic ecosystems are key focal points for us. But we also want to be an advanced city, and that's advanced manufacturing, that's advanced skills and education for our citizens, but we want to be the most secure city from a cyber point of view. This is really a key requirement for businesses of the future, and so we will be building our 115 hectares at the heart of the Aerotropolis as the most cyber secure and digitally advanced location in the Southern Hemisphere. Moving on to the next slide, I think it's important to focus around the role of the organisation. And certainly every organisation has to evolve with the needs of the city and indeed the government and the economy of the time. But our focus at this point in time is around investment. It's around investment in our Western city. It's an investment in the Aerotropolis, but really importantly with a broader remit, investment in our city centres, our Penriths, our Liverpools, our Campbelltowns, our Hawkesburys, our Blue Mountains and these key areas that they have. but also importantly our investment in our people, skills and education. And I'll come on to the work that we're doing in that space shortly. We're also a coordination organisation, so strong focus around our Chief City Coordinator, the City Deal, a blueprint, which is a new concept and work that we're producing at the moment, and our master planning, aligning our planning outcomes with our infrastructure delivery. And indeed, delivery is a strong focus, delivering on the 38 commitments of the City Deal, as well as many of those precincts and enabling infrastructure components that I referred to earlier. We're doing this, if we move to the next slide, with our foundation partners. So we have 18 foundation partners, and we have a number more key businesses who are keen to work with us across the city as partners to really achieve those outcomes that Jennifer spoke to. So here's a sample of our foundation partners, an incredible array of businesses across 4 key areas. Who are not only working with us, but informing our thinking, informing our city planning, informing our education models, and indeed looking to have a presence within our Parkland City. Moving on to the next slide, it is always important to me that we work with our local, state and Commonwealth partners. Sisters and brothers across the 8 council areas are really key in informing our work. Our councils know our city better than I can ever hope to, but absolutely key is working with our state government colleagues who can really unlock those opportunities through infrastructure provision and social and environmental outcomes. And critically, our centrepiece being our airport, but also working more broadly with the Australian government across the requirements of the City Deal and the game-changing elements that it is having to our city's livability. So now I'm going to focus on our initial 5 priorities. And I'm going to just share with you a little bit about the work that we're progressing over the next 6 to 12 months. And many of these have been shaped with our board and with our minister to really ensure that we have a holistic view of the Parkland City. So moving to the first one, certainly there is a strong focus around the blueprint for the Parkland City. What is a blueprint? Well, it's really a non-statutory document, a very pragmatic, single source of truth to help us coordinate outcomes across the Parkland City. It draws on the vision for the Parkland City created by the district plan and really delivers the thinking and the connections and the corridors in a very visual form so we can see what we've committed to and what we've already achieving for our Parkland City today. But most importantly, where we want to go and where those gaps are in connecting our blue and our green corridors, our road and our freight connections, how are we unlocking the potential of our centres, how are we backing in the opportunities in our employment areas. So this is a document that we're working closely with local government to deliver, as well as our state government colleagues. And it will be made public next year to gain the benefit of our key partners and our stakeholders' feedback and input and knowledge. But it will certainly be a living and breathing document. That is one that continuously evolves as we understand the city more, but also how we need to stage and sequence the infrastructure to support it. Very much hand in hand with the blueprint is the second priority around an economic development strategy for the Western Parkland City. So this is a citywide focus around how we can attract investment, how we can really leverage existing business opportunities, and how we can achieve that 200,000 job target that we've set for the Parkland City to rebalance the metropolis of 3 cities more generally. So the economic development strategy sits hand in glove with the blueprint. It enables it, it talks to it, and it very much is connected under that theme of green, connected and advanced, really drawing out the economic components of it. It's taking a very similar tack in terms of timeframes, and we're very keen to share it with our key stakeholders and your members, Gabe, here online next year. Again, a third component of this is the education and training program. And so this is our third priority, and this is absolutely a key focus for Jennifer in really ensuring that we not only skill our citizens of the Parkland City, but reskill many of those on the back of our recovery for our economy. But this is a new approach, a very innovative approach that's being designed with the Department of Education, with TAFE, and our universities, but really critically, the game changer is it's being designed with our foundation partners, businesses that are investing in our Parkland City. And so it's a series of courses that match the needs of these businesses. And indeed, these businesses are looking for education and skills and people with those right opportunities to help them invest in these areas. I'm learning a lot about the education space and really what a critical investment component it is for our businesses in the Western Parkland City. Priority number 4, you may have heard of to date, and that's the opportunity to create a new name for a new place. So our 115 hectares creates the opportunity to do something different, to do something innovative. And so we put a call out to our citizens over the last couple of months to share with us their thoughts for an idea for the Aerotropolis core. We've been overwhelmed with the responses. We have a rich array of suggestions, and I'm looking forward to coming back to you with the short list or the preferred approach very shortly. So watch this space. It's a small, big one, but a great opportunity to really think of a new name for a new place. Now, priority number 5 is a really key one, and it takes us back to the core of the Aerotropolis and really kickstarting change and getting some tangible outcomes in our Parkland City around our airport. And so we've focused very strongly on securing some funding from government in order to progress our thinking in this space. And one of the concepts that the Premier saw in her visits last year overseas really resonates strongly in the current focus of government, both a state and a Commonwealth government, is around an advanced manufacturing research facility. A new approach to collaboration and incubation and innovation, and an opportunity to really drive a whole ecosystem of research and delivery to commercial outcomes. So this will be, it's like something we've never seen before in Sydney, a building that brings together thinkers, researchers, but most importantly, those that are going to prototype and deliver outcomes and change. So this building's being co-designed with our industry partners, and it will be one of our signature initial buildings within the Aerotropolis core. Another key anchor tenant and initial opportunity will be the CSIRO's building, and a strong focus of this incredibly important science agency for our country, cutting edge thinking, cutting edge innovation and research. And I'm really excited by the opportunity to be working with CSIRO to not only design their building, but importantly, use their brilliant intelligence to help us design our economic development strategy and our thinking for the city as well. Moving on to the next component of our Aerotropolis core is a concept many of you may and well have heard of, the Agribusiness Precinct, leveraging off a 24/7 airport and the opportunities of linking Greater Sydney to our regions, driving the outcome for the opportunity to transport our goods from farm gate to plate within 36 hours. A key step change now with the airport, but of course with our connections, again reinforcing the importance of the city as the most connected place in the Southern Hemisphere. And then last but not least, certainly a fascinating project I've been involved in, but a real game changer for the city, is the opportunity to better co-locate and integrate service delivery. And we all know that many of us get excited about what happens above the ground in the city, but really so much of the opportunity is unlocked by what happens below the ground. So I've had the great joy of investigating an innovative approach to multi-utilities across the Western Parkland City over the last year, and our thinking about this is progressing now to a reality where by the end of the year we're hoping to seek expressions of interest to start delivering a more innovative approach in a pilot in our Aerotropolis core. So I could talk about this all day, Gabe, but I'm very conscious that we've got some brilliant members on board and online today who will want to ask us lots of questions or provide comments, thoughts and ideas. So I'll end it there and really look forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. And indeed, we have a ton of questions coming in.
Great.
Some have been emailed to me, some are submitted on Zoom, so I'll just sort through them. Sarah, let's start with you. On the physical planning side of this, you have the ambition to not have this be traditional sprawl, but to create compact, center-oriented places which would show up in much higher rates of walking, cycling, and taking public transport than what you see in Western Sydney today. This is, of course, an ambition that cities all over the world have tried and failed to achieve in new development. It is easier said than done. I know you've thought about this for your whole career. What is most essential, most important for making the physical planning ambitions turn out the way you hope?
Wow, that's a great question, and there's so many layers to this. You know, and if you start really from the big picture, it is about having the ambition, and it is about government and governance being set up to take it seriously. So the incredible opportunity we now have is to have a vision and now an organisation to deliver it, and that is, you know, should never be understated. From a city planning point of view, though, we have a Western Parkland city that, in effect, over the last couple of 100 years has been privatised. It is largely private land. And in many respects, we have to make sure that if we're serious about a parkland city, we have to start acquiring land for parklands, and we have to start building the layers of a city. Now, going from greenfield to an urban environment that is more compact and more walkable does take time. So we also have to be very considerate of that transition over time and to have that longer term vision and plan. So there's so much within that I can refer to, but I think one of the biggest things I'm learning about is to be really forward looking. We have to think about the environment, and we have to think about how we're really going to drive sustainable change in this very precious part of our city. But also we need to be thinking about future technology and those digital connections and that cyber, and getting that digital plumbing right, and having the capacity for that to grow and evolve right from the start is going to be critical to the city being a success and not another BAU. I mean, if we are serious about building a city for the next generation, then we have to be serious about cutting edge technology and putting in place the opportunities for evolution and change. And certainly that has to be a story from a greenfield to a more urban parkland environment.
Okay, Jennifer, a question for you about the economic ambition. Traditionally, Australia is grouped with the UK or the United States as liberal market economies, contrasted often with more coordinated market economies like Germany or Japan, which means that being able to pick an industry like advanced manufacturing and try to make it so is not something that has been tried so often. What is your thinking about what it will take to make the ambitions on advanced manufacturing actually be realized?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gabe. Look, I think you've got to do two things. At a macroeconomic level, if I've got my business council hat on, you've got to get the macro settings right. You can't continue to attract investment to Australia if you don't have the right conditions to do that. But at a state level and at a precinct level, you've got to have more purpose, more direction, more willingness to actually start to kind of, for example, map out some of these supply chains. What will it take to attract some of these industries? What other industries will they need? What's the skill density that they need? What's the transport that they need? And you've named a couple of the really good examples, Germany, I would name Israel, and probably even Great Britain, because they have those catapults at that precinct level very coordinated role between academic, industry, and government to drive some of these industries, advanced manufacturing, 3D printing at an industrial scale and so on. So I think we're at a point in our nation's kind of path where you do have to be a bit more purposeful. I mean, you can't just, notwithstanding my own views about laissez-faire economics, you can't just leave it to markets now. You have to go out and chase stuff. You have to actually say, where have we got comparative advantage strengths? How do we build on those? What will attract those companies? And what, you know, if you take the sort of Suzanne approach to life, that this goes with that, if you remember that ad, you do need a little bit of this goes with that. You do need a little bit of, well, what's the kind of complete ecosystem look like for advanced manufacturing so that we can start attracting all of those relevant companies. And then to your question, to Sarah, just to add something, where have we made mistakes in the past in planning? We have not got the economics right. We have not got the transport right. And so we end up with sprawl. We end up with poorly designed centres and not particularly well-connected places. But I would attest, there'll be different views about this, that a lot of that is caused by a lack of economic thinking. You know, we think about the spatial stuff and we don't think about how people are going to actually work and educate and train. And so that becomes an afterthought and then we're always playing catch up. So that would just be also an observation on the question you asked, Sarah.
Yeah, so the hope here is that because this is just as deeply focused on the economic part, that will actually help the physical planning part be successful in a way that has not been done before. That those are actually supporting each other.
Got to be interrelated. Absolutely.
Yeah. Jennifer, just to follow up on the macro settings that need to be right to enable the economic ambitions to work, what are the 2 or 3 most important changes at that macro level that would be supportive of what you guys are trying to do here?
Well, you've got to attract investment. So you've got to turn around the drought in private sector investment that has occurred in Australia. And obviously the government's announcement last week around investment incentives for companies are hugely important as part of that. I mean, over time, and people have heard me in the media on this, but that gives you a kind of real life example of it today. You have to change the competitive settings for Australian companies to come to Australia, because at the moment, a company would go to its global board and it would be saying, well, I've got to make a project stack up with a 30% high company tax rate. I've got a kind of higher regulatory burden. You know, we've got to change the competitiveness of Australia. So that's a kind of big macro challenge that governments are going to have to get their head around. Because companies tell me when they go to their global boards to get money, it's pretty difficult. The second thing though is skills, I think, Gabe. I think, you know, we have got to make our skills system, you know, more dynamic, faster, and much more industry focused. We don't have time for people to be doing the kind of training and education models in the way they've been done in the past. And we can't afford to have some of the occupational streaming that's going to, I think, take people down the wrong pathway and mean that they have to reskill and retrain. Final point I'd make is digital. You know, here's our opportunity to leapfrog the world as a digital economy. And we've seen some really great announcements federally about that, but we've got much more to do there. You know, we have got to fast track 5G. We have got to fast track the sort of digital plumbing that allows us to really compete. If we don't do those things, you know, it's you know, what a company's saying to Sarah and I when they look at coming to the Aerotropolis, it's skills, it's certainty of the regulatory environment, and it's the digital stuff. And then it's the connecting to the ecosystem, which we talked about.
All right, well, let's follow up on skills. We've got a bunch of questions about that. You have the ambition to come up with a new model. Have you figured out who is going to be delivering that? What combination of TAFE and universities or new institutions you may create? And can you say anything about the way that will be delivered?
Yeah. So first of all, we've got this new alliance, which is the 4 universities. So obviously that will be the principal focus of delivery. And
you might want to say what that is.
Okay, so that's
for the
Newcastle, Wollongong, University of New South Wales, and Western Sydney University. But that's not to exclude the other kind of major universities as well. The way we saw it rolling out is that you're basically doing a series of micro credentials that industry requires, and then a existing worker can stack those in a particular way, or you could stack them in a way that gets you a certificate for an advanced diploma or a degree. And so, you know, but that's going to be very much driven by the industry partners about how they want to stack a series of micro credentials to get people at a certain skill level that'll allow them to either work in that company or increase their skill level. So, you know, there are two pathways. Obviously, you come in as an undergraduate. That's probably more a qualification pathway. The other crucial thing, Gabe, that we want to build in is that you are working in a company, in an industry partner at the time you are doing the qualifications. So you're not doing a kind of sequential thing. And this is very much the German model for those people who are familiar with it. You've got a dual track system of higher education and TAFE or vet related qualifications, and you've got placement in a company. And that's how people acquire their skill sets in many cases in the German model. And that's what Sarah and I want to see, that you're working in a company, you're getting micro credentials, you're either building that to a qualification or you're building that to a package that the company and you have decided is essential. It's that sort of model that we're talking about. And obviously we've got to start working through a curriculum. But, you know, we've had tremendous support from the state government and the federal government to kind of break through the traditional ways of learning and working. I just can't emphasize enough how much in this model, your work, your participation in a company counts towards your qualification. That is very different to what we're doing now.
And just to state the obvious, if you guys figure it out here, this could end up being rolled out, you know, everywhere.
Absolutely, because the challenge that we see in the Parkland City and across Sydney and the country more generally is this kind of, you know, very linear model we've got. You know, you do a computer science degree, you do a particular qualification, you specialise. That's just not how occupations are going to form. That's not how skills are going to kind of transfer. So we just need to break through. If we can break through here, I think we can break through across the country.
Sarah, for people on the call who might be interested in designing or building some of the infrastructure, what can you tell us about the institutional approach to delivering it? Who will the client be? How much will you be relying on other agencies like transport versus being the client yourselves? All of that.
Yeah, look, great question, and there's a lot within that, and I acknowledge a lot of great companies online at the moment listening to us who have incredible capability to both design and deliver so many of the ambitions that we have for the Parkland City. At the moment, you know, we are certainly doing our work around master planning and the blueprint, but we're working closely with other government agencies who have critical deliverables around some pretty key city shaping components. So that is Sydney Metro. We're working very closely with, that is the Western Sydney Airport Corporation and many others. But certainly we see ourselves as an organisation that is effectively an advocate for the Western Parkland City, but also a client for many of those other state government agencies. And I think if we're successful, we become that single point of coordination and delivery for the Parkland City. Now, in saying that, we are very much development enablers, city designers and makers, but we're not a developer and a development corporation. So we want to work with our partners and we want to work with the smartest and brightest to design the city, but very much put to the market to stimulate that change, to stimulate that construction, the opportunity to deliver that infrastructure. So one of our early cabs off the rank will be the multi-utilities approach and the focus around the precinct. And we're doing a heck of a lot of research and analysis and master planning in the Aerotropolis core at the moment, but also lots of business cases. So plenty of work for the industry will be coming out of this. And indeed, my counterparts around the world are saying this is probably one of the only locations that's really driving ahead full steam with a lot of this. So, you know, I think that's important for our economic situation at the moment and supporting businesses in our city. The last thing I'll say is I think we have a role to play to present to people, to brief organisations on those forward opportunities. So I'm working with my team at the moment, and indeed Metro and other government agencies, to really start to profile over the next 12, 24 months where those opportunities are, so that we can be very open and transparent with all organisations who are interested in partnering with us or bidding for work to be done. So, so watch this space, and we'll be coming back to you.
Okay. Some questions about the airport. One widely heard prediction these days is that business travel in the post-COVID world will never come back to its former levels because it had gotten perhaps irrational. People would think nothing of flying for one meeting, which now they're going to do like this online. There is also a big push, especially from Europe, to reduce flying because of the greenhouse gas implications. Is there a risk that the projections on which the new airport was based may turn out not to come true? Does that have any implications? If so, for how you guys are thinking about the broader vision here?
Well, I might kick off and say, you know, of course, that is a matter for WSA to really give you a detailed answer on. But certainly from my discussions with them, there is a lot of optimism that by 2026, when the airport opens, many of us will be desperate to get back on a plane and go overseas. And indeed, that opportunity to travel will be strong, and the airport may indeed open at absolutely the right time to capitalise on that. But I think we also have to be very conscious about the synergistic uses around an airport and the future of many industries such as defence and space, which agglomerate with benefit from airports. And that's something that we are focused on. So certainly not putting all our eggs into one basket, but really looking at those broader growth industries, which the Australian government is investing so significantly in at the moment, but would really benefit from close proximity to an airport. So I think that's our focus, and then in turn the flow-on effect that has to many other industries. So as I said, not a single focus around the airport, but we still see it as a critical and catalysing piece of infrastructure. And you know, crystal ball in hand, who knows really how this evolves, but there will be many technologies, and there will be, you know, much interest, I think, in travelling again in time. Jennifer might have a lot more to say on that topic.
Oh, I think that's true. I think the other kind of crucial point is just the role of air travel in freight, and the role in air travel in many other parts of our economy. That's not going to change. You know, I think you've got to take I mean, the beauty of doing this project is that you're taking a kind of 50, 100-year kind of projection on things. And we already know that, you know, our existing airport in Kingsford Smith is massively congested. And so, you know, look, you know, the budget forecasts that, you know, we will be returning to population growth. So I think, to Sarah's point, the timing will be right for this airport. I think there are many assumptions about people, how they're going to work and operate. We'll see. I think people are fundamentally social creatures. So many people now are saying to me, Gabe, you know, look, we've got to get people back in the office. Some people are not, obviously. But I think we've got to be very careful about, to Sarah's point, not banking everything about the airport, but we've also got to remember the broader role that this airport will play, particularly in relation to freight.
I know if we needed if we needed certainty about the future, we'd never build anything. That's, of course, one of the paradoxes. Is
Or you would have built the harbour bridge with 2 lanes.
we build infrastructure that's around for centuries with very imperfect knowledge about the future. So it is. Well, Jennifer, let's talk about immigration. No one can get in this year. There's no reason to think that Australia will be any less attractive in the future than it was. Probably reason, in fact, to think the opposite, that it may be relatively more attractive. But lots of the projections, not just for this initiative, but all over the economy, rely on population growth. Does anything need to change in the immigration settings for Australia, or do we just need to get a vaccine and things will get back to where they were?
Well, we've got to start carefully opening the economy up. I mean, the first priority is to open state borders, which people would have heard me talk about before as pointless job killers. But on the international front, we've got to kind of use the work that the eminent Jane Holton is doing on quarantining and take that kind of careful quarantining management approach. We've got to get that right, obviously. And then we can start looking at how do we attract particularly skilled people to Australia, filling some of those skills gaps that we need. And, you know, that is not something that is impossible to do. It has to be done very carefully. Then we can look at travel bubbles with certain countries. Obviously, there's conversations with New Zealand. One top priority is international students. I mean, they have a massive flow-through effect in the economy. And the universities are working very constructively with state governments to start to find a way that we can make sure we can send that signal to term one next year, so that those students don't make alternate choices with competitor countries, because we are in a massively attractive place for them at the moment. And then finally, the federal government has announced that it will be targeting, you know, world-leading companies and world-leading talent to come to Australia. And obviously, we'll have to find the quarantining approaches to doing that. We've got to build public confidence in that process. But, you know, bit by bit, I think we can gradually open up the economy, particularly on the skilled migration and on the international students. And then we have to plan to return to the kind of migration levels we need to drive economic growth. And that's about also getting some of our economic and policy settings right. And one of those things I would always kind of lead off with is we've got to get regional development right in Australia, so that the 2 major cities are not always under pressure to take the bulk of that permanent migration, and that's really about the sort of stuff that we're doing in the Parkland City being done in Townsville, in Cairns, in Mackay, in Geelong, so that our cities become attractive places for people to live, but also attractive places for companies to invest.
Sarah, what is the energy strategy? You're on mute.
Sorry, folks. It was inevitable at some point during the hour. Look, I think that's a great question, and I think it has to be a strategy that is very much integrated with many other factors within the Western Parkland City: water, our approach to water, our approach to energy, our approach to waste, all have to be very much integrated. Jennifer and I think this is a real point of difference for the Parkland City as well, and an opportunity for a new area to be very progressive in this way. Do I have all the answers? Absolutely not. Am I dedicated to working through this and progressing it? Absolutely. And that is a piece of work alongside that digital and more cyber secure thinking that I want to progress over the next 12 months, and we'll be looking for the smartest and the brightest to help us do that, and really tying that into some pretty pragmatic outcomes for the city at the same time as being very forward thinking and world leading is the objective. No small ambition at all. So I think that's really very much the direction we're heading for a Parkland City. But Jennifer might want to share a bit more broadly, you know, from a government and sort of national context on that question.
I think the challenge is how you do world-class renewable green energy and actually create new economic opportunities as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that I'd be really interested in the committee's views on that at some point, because I think that's got to be what we do. This can't be seen as another kind of sustainable development front. It can't be seen as, we've got to stop just using the expressions. And Sarah and I are very committed that this is going to have real tangible effects, and it's got to create new sources of economic opportunity, new sorts of jobs. We can't keep talking about the green jobs of the future and then not deliver them. So I'm really committed that we actually, in doing the green bit, we link it to the advanced manufacturing, we link it to new industries as much as we're linking it to new ways of delivering energy. And I think finally, there's a massive opportunity here to get off the grid a bit and to do some of this microgrid management that allows you to kind of obviously in real time manage renewables into a system with dispatchable power. There's also huge opportunities around recycling, around waste management. And so really keen to get people's views on what the world's best practice would look like there. And then how do we turn that into new sources of economic activity?
Yeah. I mean, we could not agree more. Our thesis is that the energy transition is an incredible economic opportunity for Australia. And conversely, Australia will not make the energy transition unless it is put together as an economic opportunity. And yeah, the Parkland City is a perfect place, not the only place, but it is a perfect place to show that.
And, you know, back to our earlier slides, I mean, the incredible scale that it presents, but also the opportunity for change. And I think there is a point in time now to build back greener. And so that green, connected and advanced approach is very much interlinked around the economy and the environment.
All right, maybe just a minute of closing thoughts from each of you.
Look, I think this is just one of the biggest opportunities in the world. I mean that. I don't mean that, you know, in a kind of a lighthearted way at all. I think, you know, but it does require more purpose than we've given to things in the past. And I think we've got the kind of serendipity, if you will, of, you know, state and federal governments committing to things that were unheard of a decade ago. And I think people have forgotten the North-South Rail project is the biggest project that is kind of on the table at the moment. It's massive. They've committed to building the airport. We're seeing governments get behind these things and get behind purposeful planning in a way that I've certainly not seen it in my long time interfacing with these issues for the last 10 years. So that commitment by government, as well as the kind of people searching for those new growth opportunities off the back of COVID, and a sense of willingness to experiment and try different things, I think allows us to bring all of that together in the Parkland City and do something that's globally quite unique.
Yeah, Gabe, I often think about windows in time and in opportunity, and I see this as an incredible convergence of opportunities. So we built a lot of the foundations around a vision for the city, around governance arrangements, around a lot of goodwill and interest around the Parkland City. And then we started to invest in that, and we invested in it with rail lines, and you know, the first north-south rail line in the you know, Parkland City ever, you know, is an extraordinary signal of change. And so we've sort of been working our way through the building blocks. Now's the time to put the foot to the floor and really accelerate it. And as Jennifer said, we're being watched around the world and regarded around the world as not only a COVID-safe economy, a strong city in terms of its governance, but also one of the only ones that's seriously committing to outcomes at the moment. So we have a window in time to grab this opportunity, to grab the baton from the GSE and others that have set a lot of this up, and now to actually make something happen. So I'm really excited by that. It's very rare as a city planner you get the opportunity to make that transition and to deliver on your thinking and your vision but I want to do that in a way that raises the bar. So I'm really excited to be working with Jennifer and for us to push this harder and faster, because we have a window now that we can really optimize. So that's where I'm at. So no rest for the wicked. You know, we just got to get going.
All right, I want to thank you both for a really interesting presentation. And we'll work to, if it's okay with you both, to get your slides and put those up online.
Sure.
We always do, those of you who were asking about that. Thank you for taking time. And everybody, thank you for joining today's edition of Committee for Sydney Live. See you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, committee. Thanks, Gabe.